Hi everyone, I'm Shaylin here with Reedsy. In today's video, we're going to be talking about symbolism. Symbolism is a very common literary device. You'll see it in most pieces of literary work, but it's not always the easiest to identify, even in your own writing. Unlike something like a simile or alliteration, which is very obvious to spot because it has to do with how language is used, symbolism lies in the undercurrent of a story and is by nature metaphorical and representative and unspoken, which can make it a lot more difficult to spot. In fact, if you think your book doesn't have any symbolism in it, it probably does, you just haven't noticed it yet. Symbolism will almost always occur even without you meaning to. Symbolism is the expression of ideas through imagery. You pair a striking image with an idea, and that image becomes representative of that idea throughout the piece. You can see this very clearly in film. Because film is a visual medium, a lot of filmmakers use symbolism to great effect. The viewer won't even always be conscious of it, but the effect is still there. For example, if the love interest of a film becomes strongly associated with the color green, maybe this character is always seen wearing green and there's just a lot of green imagery surrounding this character. While maybe later in the film, when the characters are apart and the protagonist is missing this character, we could see the protagonist wearing green. Now, striking imagery isn't always a form of symbolism. Sometimes you have a striking image that is just there as a piece of description. The key with symbolism is that that image is tied to an idea and can even be developed throughout a piece. Now, a symbol shouldn't just represent any random idea, it should be tied to your piece's motifs and central themes. That's the difference between a symbol and just any given object or image in a piece. The symbol is tied to the central themes in the story. In that way, symbolism can be a very valuable form of showing rather than telling. Rather than plainly laying out or explaining the themes, symbolism can be used to show the themes through visual imagery. When you tie a theme to an image, creating a symbol, the way that symbol develops and is shown throughout a piece can show the thematic development of the piece without it ever being stated. Let's say you're writing a fantasy book where the prosperity of a kingdom is represented by the animal that's on their house crest. Say a horse. At the beginning of the piece, maybe in this kingdom, we see wild horses running freely through the meadows. But maybe by the end of the piece, after this kingdom has fallen, we just find a single injured horse stumbling alone through the woods. Because of its striking visual nature, symbolism can be used to create both an intellectual and an emotional response in the reader. Some symbols are extremely innate. We just understand without ever being told what it means. If a character stumbles across an old worn teddy bear on the ground with all the stuffing falling out and one of the eyes is missing, we innately just know that the teddy bear symbolizes childhood. And so if the character has been dealing with themes of growing up or, loss of innocence or, coming of age, and this symbol is placed at the appropriate moment, it can be very impactful because it's just an innate symbol that we all understand. Symbols can also make a story relatable in that way. Some symbols are universal. They symbolize the same thing, or often symbolize the same thing, unless developed in another way, across the entire literary canon, such as how water is a symbol for rebirth. But other symbols are very unique to a story, and they only gain their meaning and relevance due to the specific context of the piece. When using a more universal symbol, the reader can intuit that meaning without it ever being explained, maybe without them even noticing, but the meaning is there and they just understand it intuitively. And those associations can make the story relatable because they speak to the broader symbolic context of literary canon that readers are probably familiar with even if they don't know it. So how about a few tips to create and implement symbolism in your work? First of all, pattern. If you're trying to create a symbol that lasts through an entire piece rather than just being a single image and it develops over the course of the story, you need to pattern it in from the very beginning. It can't just come in at the last moment. It needs to be established from the beginning so that the symbol can develop over the course of the story. If you're trying to establish that curtains represent the main character's longing for the past, that needs to be established from the very beginning, and so that at the end of the piece, when the main character closes the curtains and it's established that he's now able to move on with his life, those seeds have been planted from the very start and it will really have a lot of emotional resonance. Tip 2, don't be afraid to subvert. Like I mentioned earlier, some symbols have innate literary meaning. We just know what they mean without being told. But they can also be subverted. Light and dark are often used to symbolize good versus evil, but this is such a overdone visual metaphor at this point that you might be better off flipping it around or using an entirely different color scheme to represent the different sides of morality in your piece. Symbols don't have to fit their predefined definitions if you put in the work to develop new associations for them. And that juxtaposition can be very striking. Like I mentioned earlier, water typically signifies rebirth, but maybe in your piece you want to do the work on the page so that water signifies corruption instead. It's counterintuitive because it goes against what we innately understand water to mean in a literary context, but it can be very, very striking and very impactful because it will be a unique association and symbol that exists only within your piece. The next tip is to not explain your symbols. Symbols should be able to speak for themselves. You don't want to explain the meaning on the page. The narrator or a character speaking to the meaning of a symbol can also feel very unnatural. In many ways, symbolism is a literary device that isn't very reflective of real life. In real life, it's not very realistic that a single image is going to follow us throughout our entire character arc and symbolize the important themes in our lives in a meaningful way. Characters shouldn't be aware that a symbol is a symbol or that an image in the story is representative of an important theme. And speaking to a symbol directly can dissolve and ruin the nuance and subtlety that you've worked to build up for it. And finally, develop your symbols over the course of a story. Sometimes a symbol is just a static image that appears in one instance, but often the most impactful symbols are the ones that develop throughout the course of an entire story. Showing a symbol in different contexts and different ways so that it mirrors the thematic development or mirrors the character's arc can be very, very impactful. And it relies on threading that symbol throughout the entire piece in a way where it moves and develops and changes in the same way as the character. This can then be used to show subtext, right? If there's something the character is feeling, those images can then be used to bring out the subtext and show what the character is thinking or feeling or wants without it ever being stated through exposition. So those are some tips on how to create symbolism in your work. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos from us. We've got new writing, editing, and publishing tips every Tuesday and Friday. Until next time, bye.